Hello, and welcome to this Jerusalem Press Club briefing. I'm Esty Ari, Press Director of the JPC. Before we jump into what we were discussing, what we were planning on discussing today, which is Iran and the nuclear talks, the discussions that we had in the New York Times, President Donald Trump commenting on it last night, I want to first introduce our speaker today, and that is Oded Ailam, former head of the Counterterrorism Center in the Mossad, and currently a researcher at the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs, the JCFA. Thank you so much, Oded, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
A pleasure. So I know, we kind of got together today to talk about what's going on with the talks in Iran because of its immense importance for Israel, for the region, for the United States, and for the world. But just before we got online, you and I had a little chat about what's going on with the Gaza humanitarian area and the areas that are giving out the humanitarian aid. And I wonder if you can just share some of your thoughts on that and the meaning of these new locations.
Yeah, sure, certainly. What we are observing right now in Gaza is quite phenomenal because it's for the first time the Hamas is losing its grip on the population. They were asserting and they were threatening and they did everything in their power in order to discourage the population from reaching those points and receiving the food, because controlling the food and controlling the supply is controlling the population, and they are losing it. And the fact that we have been observing some phenomenal event yesterday, like the looting of the Hamas warehouse, is something we've never seen before. That means this is the starting of the collapse of the Hamas regime. We've seen it all over the world when doctrines, when dictatorship were collapsing. The first phase was when the population realized they don't have the power of them and they don't fear them anymore. And this right now, what we are seeing is the first step for the collapse of the Hamas regime in Gaza. And it's extremely important that it will continue, and we should encourage those steps. It's not just Israel, but all the Western world that wants to get rid of these jihadists, extremists, and let the people of Gaza, for the first time I think in their history, to live decent life.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your comments and your thoughts on that. Like I said, I know, we got together this morning to talk about the other big issue in the room, but I didn't want to ignore this as it's happening. And as so many people are focused on that right now. And so I do want to kind of bring us back to our actual topic of discussion this morning, which is the Iran-US talks. The New York Times reported earlier this week that Prime Minister Netanyahu has been threatening to so-called upend the American talks with Iran by striking Iran's main nuclear enrichment facilities, a report that the PMO called fake news. Then last night, President Donald Trump said, in fact, he has warned the Prime Minister against attacking, Iran at this juncture, although this could change with a phone call. And then this morning, there are reports that a deal between Washington and Tehran may be struck as soon as next week. So we know that both the U.S. administration and the Prime Minister have made clear that Iranian nuclear enrichment is a no-go, is a non-starter, and can't be happening. So I guess the question is, are these divergent views on how to get there? Is this possible that it's going to get there? What does this mean in terms of what we're seeing as perhaps a gap between the approaches of the U.S. administration and Israel? And so, there's a lot to unpack in terms of what's going on here. And, as President Trump said, everything could change with a phone call. So I'm wondering, if we can get your thoughts and perspective as to where the talks are right now, and what the likelihood of these talks actually leading to no nuclear enrichment in Iran are.
I will start with saying something which is, I don't know if it will be very sweet to American ears, but Witkoff and his team are no match for the shrewd fox of the Iranians, and especially Abbas Araghchi, who has conducted the talks in 2015 and reached the agreement with the Obama team. They are no match. They are cunning, they are shrewd, they have their strategy, and with all the respect to Witkoff, who is a real estate mogul, he doesn't understand the culture, he doesn't understand how the Iranians are top-notch negotiators. If you look at the history, in 2,000 years, the Iranian never won even a single war and never lost a single negotiation. And so if we look and we observe at this point of negotiation, let's remember how we started. Trump had declared that there will be no enrichment whatsoever in Iran. In fact, they should dismantle all the facilities that they already possess. Also, he declared that the deal will engulf not only the nuclear facilities, but also the ballistic, the drone, and of course, the proxies, where Iran is the major manipulator of proxies in the area and initiating terror. And also there's a slight event that they tried to assassinate President Trump. And what is Trump saying now? He said, yeah, the assassination, it's okay. I forgive you. Drones, no need to talk about it. Even it came down to the fact that they are already speaking as the negotiation just started. You just put your cards on the table of allowing Iran to enrich 3.2% of uranium, which is so-called civilian enrichment, which is useless because the Iranians really don't need all this enrichment process for civilian process, because they are the fifth in the world in oil and natural gas. They have no need whatsoever for this so-called civilian enrichment. And let's not forget another thing. The Iranian possessing probably 270 or even 300 kilos of enriched uranium to 60%, which enabled them in no time to reach the threshold of 90% with this amount of enriched nuclear. They can turn it in between 2 weeks and 2 months into 4 to 5 nuclear warheads. And we are not talking about it. They were supposed to transfer it out of Iran. Even when the agreement was signed in 2015, they breached it immediately. And there were 3 things they were supposed to do: is dismantle Arak, a nuclear facility, remove 5.5 tons of nuclear enriched uranium to Russia, and also abort completely any sort of military enrichment. And the Mossad had stolen their archive, and we saw that they will continue. They did not dismantle Arak, and they definitely did not move anything. And this exactly is what they're probably going to do now. But since they are so good at negotiation and so good at manipulating the American team, which has, I would say, they don't realize the complexity of the enrichment process. Witkoff, he's a good guy with good intentions, but he has no basic knowledge how to negotiate in the Middle East. And so the Iranians probably feel quite comfortable with how it is proceeding, while Israel, and I think not just Israel and the West, should really worry, because what we are seeing is more or less the 2015 agreement, the JCPOA, with some cosmetics on it, some powder, some lipstick. They will concede to some of Trump's demands in order to reflect that he had achieved something that he never achieved before. But we are not going into the right direction. And the most alarming thing that Israel is out of the picture, because Israel does not have any say whatsoever in the process. And this is something that we really have to worry about. And I think that Israel should be just outside the door of the negotiation room and should whisper on the president's ear and of Witkoff the intelligence, as well as what are our red lines. And this doesn't happen right now. And I think I'm not, you cannot, the only thing that is predictable in the Middle East is that things are unpredictable. And I think that we are not marching towards the right direction right now regarding achieving some sort of a agreement that will sustain and Israel will be able to swallow. On the other hand, Israel has no capability right now of striking independently without the approval of the Americans. It's impossible. It's impossible for two reasons. The first reason is that we don't have the ammunition in order to eradicate, annihilate the full complex of the Iranian project, which is dispersed all over Iran. We need this sort of special ammunition that only the Americans can provide. And second, it's the political, because in order to initiate such a strike, you have to have the green light from the Americans. You cannot do it by themselves. Taking into consideration the retaliation afterwards of the Iranians, that Israel will need its allies. So in a way, Israel right now is in a deadlock.
Okay, that's a very cheery assessment. But let's
That's
dig in a
reality.
little bit. Right, let's dig in a little bit to some
If
more
you
things.
want, I can give you more a better optimistic one.
We'll try and end on an optimistic note. We know that the administration officials have talked about the enrichment being a red line. The press secretary said it, Witkoff himself, I believe Secretary Rubio perhaps as well. There was discussion of this red line of enrichment. From what you've just said, I understand that you don't think that that is the case, that red line will hold in these negotiations. And so we talk about the repercussions. I wonder if you can expand a little bit about what that repercussions really means. Let's focus for a second on the idea that there will be a deal of some kind. What is the repercussions for Iran and the United States and Israel, and also the region? You spoke about the region. I think we need to look at Saudi Arabia and some of the other actors here as well. What does this mean if there is a deal struck? And then I guess we'll get into what does it mean if there is a strike struck as well?
The repercussions are very clear. First of all, the regime will be able to lift the sanctions, which are causing them huge damage, and the economy is in the lowest point, I think, since the end of the Iraqi-Iran war in August 1988. And the lifting of the sanction, and even partially lifting of the sanction, will give oxygen to the regime and will deter all the other factors in Iran from trying to topple the regime. This is the major repercussion. Also, it signals to the Arab world, especially to the Emirates and the Saudis, that the Iranians are still a major player in the area. They are still holding on their values. They are still a threat to the region. And the Americans were not able to couple or to bring any sort of, I would say, a big stick in order to facilitate what should be done long time ago. And this is a very negative message to the area regarding the role of America here in the area. America actually portrays, listen, we are not anymore the cop or the good cop or the bad cop. It depends who is talking to. And we basically leave you on your own. As long as you do some business with us and invest in America, we are okay with it. The rest, you can take care of yourself, and bye-bye.
So those are serious repercussions, and I want to talk about the other repercussions that we talked about, that you touched on, which is an Israeli strike. You said that Israel cannot attack on its own. On the other hand, we know that some in Israel feel like if Israel is going to attack, that this is the time because the air defenses were taken out, or a great deal of them were taken out in October. And the Ring of Fire has, of course, also been impacted, the so-called Ring of Fire, right? So is this not the right time? Some in Israel are asking if we're going to attack to do so as well. And even though you say that they can't do so on their own. So I wonder if you can talk about the tactical issues involved with what does it mean to attack on their own or not attack on their own, and is it possible? And if Israel does in fact go it alone, what kind of retaliation would it be that Israel could expect on Israel and the cost to Israel itself? I guess both in terms of a actual retaliation from Iran and also the global impact.
You know, it's a very good question because, first of all, I think the negotiation tactics being used by Witkoff are wrong. He should use Israel as Khomeini at that time described. Israel is the mad dog that America sends to bite the Islam. And he should have used that exactly this phrase of Khomeini in the negotiation, saying, listen, if you don't comply with our demands, we cannot control this mad dog. It's not under control. We're not responsible for what those crazy Israelis are going to do. And this thing is something that, from my knowledge from 24 years in the Mossad and dealing with the Iranians, scares the hell out of the Iranians. The fact that Israel is not controllable. And what Witkoff and Trump are doing is exactly the opposite. They're saying, don't worry, they are under our thumb. We control them. They will not strike. They will not do. It doesn't really matter if Israel has the actual capabilities of striking or not. But the fact that the Iranians fear such an attack is a very key point in maintaining the negotiation and achieving any sort of, let's say, shift from the stubbornness of the Iranians more towards the goals of the West. But that doesn't happen. And I think Trump is too much eager to cut the deal, and he reflects it in his moves and reflects it in his speech and so on. Now, let's go back to Israel. What can Israel really do right now? Of course, Israel can strike Iranian facilities. This goes without saying. The question is, what is the nature of the damage that we can inflict in this strike? And unfortunately, it's quite limited. Let's not forget all the big facilities like in Fordow, in Natanz, in Isfahan, and so on, are around 200 feet or even 300 feet under the ground in a mountain area. Very, very difficult target to to strike with whatever Israel ammunition we have. And we have some capabilities, but not to the extent that we can penetrate such places. And another thing, some of the laboratories, especially the warheads laboratories, are in Iran. You don't need to hide them in the mountains. They're in Iran, and Israel hasn't the capabilities of striking those in a very populated area like Iran. And another thing, the Iranians acquired a lot of knowledge, which is extremely important in reshaping and rebuilding the nuclear infrastructure after initial strike. They have the engineers, they have the know-how, they have some assistance from North Korea, and the only thing that they can do is just regather and rebuild the whatever will be damaged. And I don't think Israel has the capability of completely eradicating it unless, and I said unless, we also combine the ground forces, which means we have to bring ground forces into Iran, somewhat like the Americans have been trying to do in 1979, I think, trying to rescue their hostages, and it turned out a big fiasco. This is a very, very risky business on behalf of Israel, and I'm not sure how much the Israeli government is willing to see or to take such measures right now. So I think an independent Israeli attack right now is off the table. It doesn't matter what we are trying to portray. It doesn't matter what we are trying to say. It's really off the table. So the only way to cope with what is happening right now is to try to get as close as possible to the Americans in order to influence the talks between the Americans and the Iranians.
Okay, despite your assessment that an attack right now would be off the table, I do want to go into the world of theoretical for a minute, and talk about if Israel were to strike Iran, and assuming that strike is successful, right? What does that look like? What does the day after or the hours after that look like here in the region? And of course, also if that strike is, God forbid, not successful, right? What happens then?
One thing for sure that we have seen it before, they are going to strike Israel with all whatever they have, and they have quite a lot of capacity to strike Israel, like with drones and ballistic missiles, supersonic missiles, and so on. They have the capability. We haven't destroyed it yet, so they'll probably try to use it. They also will try to, I think, and I'm not sure in what extent, to attack American targets in the Gulf. They will definitely use the Houthis to strike as well with anything that they have. But also, let's not forget that they are limited. They don't have the Hezbollah anymore. It was the major player that they built on in order to initiate such an attack. It doesn't exist. They don't have Syria. And in that sense, they are quite limited. They might also strike Saudi Arabia, but not to the extent that it will cause the Saudis to engage military with Iran. But you have to think about one thing which is very important. We haven't talked about it. The weak spot of Iran is not the nuclear facilities, is the oil. And in fact, 85% of the Iranian economy is dependent on exporting oil, and about 87% of the oil, which is 1,800,000 barrels a day, is exported to China. And it's exported to China from a tiny island, which is more or less smaller than New Jersey, which is called Kharg. and all the export facilities are located there. Once Israel strike this facility, the Iranian economy, I would say, even doomed. And they know that, and this is a very, very weak spot for the Iranians, and they fear such an attack by Israel because we actually gave them some sort of a promo when we attacked Hodeidah in Yemen, and we did it on purpose to reflect, listen, this is Hodeidah, 2,300 kilometers. You are 1,700 kilometers, which is much easier. And so this thing, the possibility that Israel can strike the oil facilities and also the natural gas facilities is something that it's very, very much on their mind, and in all the negotiations, it's a major factor for the Iranians.
Right. I guess it's, there's more than one ways to deal with things. And I want to move away for a second from a potential Israeli strike, potential Israeli-American strike. I don't know if there's things going on, behind the scenes or that are maybe being discussed. But to talk about what a deal would look like, that is being discussed right now, and also potentially if the talks fall apart, then what happens? If no deal is reached and either side decides to pull away from these talks, what can we expect to see then? Do we expect to see a strike? Do we expect to see robust sanctions? Do we expect to see what do you think that we'll be seeing then?
I will start with the last question. What happens if the deal doesn't go off? Remember, there's a deadline for negotiations, which is the 28th of October, where the agreement expire, and there is the snapback system, which means automatically the United Nations inflict harsh sanctions on Iran, and this is some sort of a deadline because you cannot prolong the talks beyond this 28th of October. So let's assume theoretically that they reach a dead end and there is no deal. Everybody goes home. The delegations goes home, and that's it. I think it will take a period of time for trying to resume the negotiation. And don't forget, even in 2015, the Iranian purposely went into some sort of, I would say, artificial crisis during the negotiation in order to improve their standpoint. So there will be crisis, and the delegation will go and come back and so on. We will see that. But let's assume theoretically we'll reach a dead end, okay? If that happens, I think that there will be no way or other way but to initiate a strike. It can be held mainly by Israel and supported by the United States. I don't think, as I see the administration right now, that the Americans will lead such a strike, but definitely they will stand behind an Israeli strike and even assist Israel in intelligence and also maybe provide us some busters for special bombs like the Moab or other bombs that can penetrate the facilities. But if we reach that point, there will be a strike because I don't see any other alternative to that. Now, what will be the nature of the deal? It's very hard to say because I must say that I think even the Iranians are stunned by the rapid crumbling of the Americans' standpoint just at the beginning of the negotiations. I don't think they expected such a rapid withdrawal from all the announcement they had made. So I think the Iranians feel quite comfortable that they will be able to reach some sort of agreement that will enable Iran to enrich 3.2% of uranium. It's a big question mark. What are we going to see regarding the dismantling of 10,000 centrifuge in Iran, and what happened with the dismantling of Iraq, and what happened with the 6.5 ton of uranium that was enriched, and mainly what's going to happen with the 270 kilo of enriched uranium to say 60% that they already possess. Is it going to be a part of the agreement? Perhaps they transfer it to Russia, or what they are going to do with it? So those questions are very important questions. I think at the end of the day, but I don't want to predict anything, the agreement will allow the Iranian to enrich to what is called civilian enrichment. And I think that's more or less where we are heading, which means that we are more or less on the same place we were with the Obama's agreement.
Okay, we have a few more questions that have come in. Some go back to some of the things that we discussed, some things other differently. So I see from what you have said, I understand you're not impressed with the walking back of the initial comments of the administration at the beginning of the discussions, saying that no, we're not at 3.2, no enrichment at all. Not so impressed with those comments, I see. No, okay. So a couple of additional questions that have come in relating to an Israeli strike. If Israel were to strike on its own, not in the context of a deal that has fallen apart, but on its own, you said Israel would have to do it on its own. The U.S. would not be part of that. But would the U.S. still stand behind Israel in the event of Iranian ballistic missile strikes, excuse me, against Israel, in the event of a retaliation from Iran?
Absolutely, yes. I think America will stand behind Israel if we're attacked by some more or less what happened in October. I I think the Americans will stand by Israel, especially this administration. Even if Israel will disobey the American order, they will stand by Israel and they will assist Israel in order to foil this attack. For that, I'm absolutely certain.
Okay. Another question has come in here that's a little bit of a different tack, which is relating to Russia. And what role, if any, can Russia play in this? For example, can the Russians pressure Iran into something in order to get something back from get something going on the Ukrainian front? We know that it's the same people involved in the negotiations on many different fronts in the United States administration. Perhaps there can be some give and take there.
I think the Russian role right now is quite limited regarding Iran. First of all, the Russians suffered a major blow in Syria. The fact that the Russians had to almost evacuate all of their stronghold in Syria, and the fact that the Russian did not help the Iranian forces or affiliated forces in Syria shows that the Iranians do not really trust or do not really think the Russians have any sort of a leverage here in the area, and I think the Iranians become even more suspicious towards Russia than before. I don't think there will be any sort of a deal that okay, let's make a deal on Ukraine and a takeoff and in Iran. That's not a case anymore. I think the axis is a bit dismantling right now. The kingpin and the pivots of the axis were Iran, Russia, and China. And I don't think this axis right now is strong enough to hold any sort of a mutual deal.
Okay, a couple more questions have come in regarding a potential deal. One is related, and I think you touched on this before, but if we'll just go back to it, relates to a deadline. How long can the Iranians drag this on? I know you mentioned something about October. I wonder if you can just address that again. And I would add to that, if there is a deal that's dragging on for a long time, or negotiations that are dragging on for a long time, or a deal in stages, what does that do for the potential of the Israelis to act or not act? Right. If it's a deal that's ongoing, discussions that are ongoing, and the Iranians are rebuilding their air defenses, what does that do for that? So I guess it's a two-part question. One, in terms of the deadline, how long this can be dragged out, and what does that mean for Israel's window of opportunity?
First of all, let's make it clear: the Iranians are not building their air defense. Russia does not supply the S-400 to system to Iran, and so far they haven't been able to replace the huge damage that was inflicted on them by the Israeli strike. So they are not rebuilding. They're trying here and there to make some sort of assembly, but they're not rebuilding their capacity, and the Russians do not help them on that sense. Second thing, they cannot prolong the talks for a long time, although the Iranians' aim is to make this negotiation as flexible as possible. The Iranians have the word sabr, which means the patience. And the Iranians are mastermind in negotiation and patience, while the American all the time reflects, let's cut a deal right now. Okay, but there is a deadline, and the deadline is the 28th of October, and it's even before that, because I think sometime in July there should be some sort of a conference regarding what's going to be the outcome of the snapback that we said. So it cannot be prolonged for a long time. Now, Israel right now is in sort of a deadlock, because Israel will not strike as long as the negotiations are being carried on, and because the Americans simply will not allow it. And so right now we are on the sideline, or not even the sideline. We're sitting on the upper floor in the stadium, watching what is happening. And this is something that we have to try to be intimately involved in the process, and not just on the sideline.
Okay, we're going to just ask a couple more questions and we'll wrap up after that. I know our time is coming to an end. You said that Israel should try and get involved rather than sitting on the bleachers. And so I guess the question is, do you think that that's possible at this stage of the game?
Yes, I think it's possible. I think it's possible. I think Israel should use its influence in the Congress, should use or utilize its very, very good contacts with some of the top national advisors of the Trump administration. Israel should be focused right now on one thing and one thing only, is to be a part of the negotiation. And we can do it. We can do it. It's definitely we can. We have a leverage there, and I think we should utilize whatever we can in order to be a paramount player, and not just, as I said before, sitting on the bench.
Okay. A couple more questions have come in as we're discussing all of these issues. One relates to action, potential Israeli action, which is that the Prime Minister here is sometimes seen as hesitant to take this kind of action. You touched on this earlier in our discussion. If all of the stars align, or everything comes out in terms of these times, how likely it is, do you think that the Prime Minister would actually give a go order to do this kind of action in Iran?
You know, I think we have to go back to history a little bit, to 2011. It made, I think, September 2010. Israel was going to strike the nuclear facilities of Iran that at that time were very, very much premature, and we could have wiped them out at that time. And because there was internal, I would say, internal struggle within the Israeli administration, mainly it was at that time the Meir Dagan, the head of the Mossad, and Yuval Diskin, the head of the Shin Bet, and Ashkenazi, who was the IDF chief, refused to do it at that time, and it was and actually they almost forced Netanyahu to back off from this initial plan at that time. Had we done it at that time, things would have been completely different today, and this is that was a grave mistake then. I think on the psychological level, Netanyahu today is a different person in that sense. I think he knows that sometimes if you lose the opportunity, it will never come back again. And so I think that if the talks fail, Netanyahu will definitely drive into strike in Iran, unlike the last time. He will not give away to some sort of sweet talk by the Americans, like give us some more chance to try that, and he will not do it. You know, he's full of scars from the previous time. So I think this time he would strike.
I think, the world is all very different these days. I think this is going to be our final question that has come in just now, which is relating to what you said regarding the negotiations. If this is similar to what the Obama administration negotiated, and Iran broke the promises of that with that agreement, how can this similar situation be acceptable?
I think that there should be a major change in the terms of the supervision of the IAEA this time. We should not leave any part of Iran that is not controlled by the IAEA and supervised in a way that the Iranians cannot fool the supervision like they did last time. So this should be a major and important part of the deal, to allow the IAEA almost free access without any early warning to anywhere that they suspect there is a breach of what is happening. And I think this should be a major change from what we have seen so far.
Okay, well, I guess time will tell. Possibly time very soon will tell. Okay, I have just gotten in one last question as I was about to thank you and say goodbye, and that is related to, I don't know if you are able to address this. It just came in that the IDF has struck the Yemen airport again. I guess today I didn't see that, but that's the question that I'm receiving here, and I'm wondering, considering what you think what kind of impact. I know we're shifting away from Iran for a second, but maybe not so much. Maybe that's connected, considering how all these issues are connected. The question is, if the only real way to beat the Houthis is to take out their leadership or to take action that has not yet been taken, let's put it that way, what impact would this strike have today?
Nothing.
Okay.
No impact at all. The Houthis fought around 10 years against the Saudis. They suffered tremendous blows. Around 250,000 people had died, and the Houthis won. The Houthis has a resilience and a robust that we never seen anyone like that before. The only way to topple down the Houthis is by creating a coalition of the tribes that are against the Houthis in Yemen, putting into the Saudis back into the game, because remember, there's a ceasefire between the Houthis and the Saudis, and using targeted attacks in order to eliminate the Abd al-Malik al-Houthi family, which runs the Houthis from 2004. And otherwise, I don't see any sort of solution to this problem. But take into consideration that once there is some sort of a ceasefire in Gaza or some sort of solution in Gaza, the Houthis will immediately stop the strike. That doesn't mean that they would dismantle their capacity or they cannot resume the strike whenever they wish, but that's reality. So I don't see any sort of actual, I would say, crumbling of the Houthis due to strikes on this airport, which doesn't actually affect no one.
And like you said, we know that the Saudis also fought in Yemen. There was all the issues there relating to the brink of the hunger and the famine there as well. That did not go so well for them, and that they were stopped, of course, from working there. Okay, there's a lot more that we can discuss. I feel like we can have a conversation for the entire afternoon, but I know that that's not fair to your time. And so I'm going to, I think, wrap it up here. Perhaps we'll have you on again to discuss all the other issues and all the other fun things going on. So I want to thank you again very much, Oded Ailam, former head of the Counterterrorism Center in the Mossad and currently a researcher at the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs, the JCFA. Thank you so much for joining us today and for your time and your insights. And I'd like to thank also my colleagues, Jonathan Beck and Ali Naor, for facilitating this briefing. I'd like to wish everyone a very good day and a good weekend. See you next time.
Thank you very much.